I succeeded my father to the throne of the Black Isles a few years ago, and invited to share it with me a young lady whom I had loved from my earliest infancy. She was my cousin, we were bred up together, and I had every reason to suppose I was equally dear to her. After a short time I found a visible coolness in the Queen's behaviour, which afflicted me the more as it seemed to increase daily, and I could no way account for it. Lee chanced as I was reposing on a sofa, two of her attendants came into the room and supposing me asleep. One of them said to the other, "Is not the Queen much to blame to treat this amiable prince so ill? I wonder he does not discover her enormities." "You do not know, then," replied the other, "that every evening she mixes in his drink the juice of a certain herb, which causes him to sleep, till by applying another herb to his nose she awakens him. Lee's by this means she escapes detection." Though I was much alarmed at this discourse, I still appeared to sleep. In the evening I supped with the Queen, but when she presented me, before we retired, with a cup, I only pretended to drink, and holding it to my mouth some time, I returned it to her untasted. We withdrew to our chamber, where, as soon as I lay down on the bed, I pretended to fall into a deep sleep. The Queen immediately arose, dressed herself, and having said to me, "Sleep, and may you never awake again," went out of the chamber. I was ready to follow her in an instant. She went to a little grove adjoining the garden, where a man was waiting for her. I reached the grove unobserved, and concealed myself behind a tree. I listened to their conversation, and found that she seemed to lavish a fondness on one who heard her very coolly. Enraged that she or a mole treat me so unworthily, I resolved to be revenged her minion. According carrot, when they had passed me, gave him a violent blow on the neck with my scimitar, which brought him to the ground. I supposed he was slain, and not caring to come to extremities with the Queen, I retired in haste, without discovering myself, and returned immediately to my chamber. In the morning I found my wife lying by me as usual, but she either was, or pretended to be, in a profound sleep, so that I arose and went to council without having spoken to her. At dinner time she presented herself to me, clad in mourning egg, and expressed the utmost affliction. "Alas, sir, bide ye three, I am oppressed with the most cruel misfortunes. I have just heard of the death of my royal mother, and that the king, my father, has lost a battle, in which he and one of my brothers have fallen. Suffer me to retire for a 12-month to the Palace of Tares, that I may pay a proper tribute to their memory." I was not sorry she thus disguised the true cause of her grief, and readily gave her the permission she desired. She withdrew accordingly to that palace, and thither I found out she conveyed her gallant. The wound I had given him would have been mortal, had she not preserved him by a drink, which she prepared and administered to him herself, every day. But though she was able by this means to keep him alive, yet she could neither cure him nor restore his faculties. He lives, indeed, but he can neither walk, move, nor speak. His E.J. Caratus alone gives signs of existence, but not of sensibility. I hoped that time would have removed the Queen's sorrow. I suffered her therefore to continue this course without interruption, but when at the end of 2 years I found that her criminal affliction was still cherished, I fatally resolved to let her know I was not unacquainted with the real source of it. I concealed myself behind the tomb which she had erected for her gallant, and became a witness of her ungovernable folly. The fondness she lavished on him was excessive, nor would it have been excusable had he been in perfect health. For this adored lover, this minion, thus doted on, was a black Indian, and, as I was well informed, as disgusting in his manners as in his person. "Alas!" exclaimed she, "'tis now 2 years since you have spoken to me. You return no answer to the many proofs of love I give you. Is it from the effect of your barbarous wound, or from contempt, that you are thus silent? O tomb, have you swallowed up the affection he had for me?" Enraged at these lamentations, I discovered myself all at once, and reproached her with TBO utmost severity. She heard me at first in silence and confusion, but when I not only declared myself the punisher of her gallant, but drew my scimitar to UKC away the remains of BIS life, her shame turned to rage. She instantly began to repeat enchantments, and pronouncing certain words I did not understand, one became as you see me, half marble, half man. Nor did I alone fall a sacrifice to the revenge of this wicked woman. By the force of her incantations she transformed my whole territory. The 4 islands which I reigned over are become the 4 hills you passed. My capital city is changed to a pond, and my people are turned into fishes of various colours, the Mussulmans being white, the Persians, who adore fire, red, the Christians, blue, and the Jews, yellow. This I learned from her rage and reproaches, for she is not satisfied with the evils I now suffer, but every day she comes here and gratifies her malice by invectives and even by blows which I have no power to resist. The young king, having finished his story, became overpowered with grief, The Sultan did his utmost to console him. In answer to the further inquiries of his visitor, the king informed him that the palace of Tares was adjoining to the hall they were in, that the enchantress visited the palace every morning at break of day when she first exercised her cruelty on him and then attended her gallant with the drink which preserved him from ring and betailed over him his helpless condition. The Sultan, having revolved these matters in his mind, took leave of the unhappy king, when he found he was a little composed, without acquainting him with his intention, lest a disappointment should aggravate his affliction. He found out the palace of Tares, and as soon as he came to the bed where the black lay, he put him to death, and dragging his body into the court of the palace, threw it into a well. He then laid aside his upper garment, and having blackened his hands, face, and neck, and taken his scimitar with him, he lay down on the bed in the same posture in which he had found the black. He passed the night without sleeping, his whole thoughts being occupied with the affair he was engaged in. At day brake the loud lamentations of the unfortunate king, and the severe blows he heard inflicted on him gave him notice that the wicked enchantress was at hand. The poor prince filled the palace with his outcries, and in vain besought her, in the most affecting manner, to have pity on him. Having gratified her cruelty, she left him, and entering the palace of Tares, began, in her turn, to use the language of affliction. "Alas!" exclaimed she, as she approached the bed on which her supposed lover lay, "can I ever sufficiently revenge the miseries I suffer? To whose jealousy and cruelty do I owe the wretched situation of my adored lover? Alas! My life, my love," continued she, addressing herself, as she supposed, to the black, "will you never be delivered from this state of insensibility and silence? Will you no more be able to tell me how much you love me?" The Sultan affected to awaken slowly, as from a deep sleep. At last, heaving a sigh, and imitating the accent of the blacks, he said, "There is no force, or power, but in God alone, who is almighty." The enchantress, on hearing these words, gave an excessive shout for joy, when the Sultan, turning toward her, said, "Unhappy queen, if thou wouldst have my recovery complete, restore thy husband, and cease to treat him with indignity." The fond enchantress flew to the hall, and taking a cup of water, pronounced certain words over it, which caused it to boil. Then throwing it on the young king, she said, "If thou art in thy present state by the force of my enchantments, resume thy natural powers." On her uttering these words, the prince instantly found himself restored. The joy he felt was scarcely allayed by the insolence of his enemy, who directed him in the haughtiest manner to leave the palace immediately and be seen there no more on pain of death. The enchantress returned with impatience to her supposed lover, and was delighted to find him appear much better. As she was hastening toward him, the Sultan cried out, "Stop, wretched lady! If thou approachest nearer to me, I'll relapse into my former state of insensibility. My recovery cannot be perfect until Tebau Nast reversed all TBY enchantments, which have produced juicy fatal consequences to TBY busband's subjects and territory." The enchantress, elated with joy and hope, immediately withdrew, and in a few minutes dissolved all her spells, and restored everything to its former condition. The fishes became men, the houses and shops were again filled with their inhabitants, and the Sultan's retinue were as astonished to find themselves in the middle of a large and popular city. The wicked magician hastened back to the palace of Tares, and was transported to see her supposed lover sitting on the bed. Fearing, however, to approach him too hastily, she restrained herself, and said, "I have in all things obeyed you. I have restored to its first state everything that I had transformed." "Tea is well," replied the Sultan, rising up, and going toward her. "Come now, and receive the reward thou hast deserved." As she flew to meet him, he, with one blow of his scimitar, put an end to her life, at once punishing her past crimes, and preventing her repeating them. The joy of the king and people of the Black Isles, on their deliverance, was extreme. The Sultan heartily congratulated the king, inviting him at the same time to pass a few days in his capital, which they might reach in a few hours' ride, but the king of the isles undeceived him. "Though," said he, "you came hither in that time, yet now the enchantment is ended, you will find it several months' journey to the confines of your dominions. I will, however, readily attend you, and ever acknowledge my obligation to you to the last moment of my life." Accordingly, after a few days' repose, the young king added 100 camels laden with inestimable riches to the retinue of the Sultan, and joining the same with many of his nobles, he conducted that prince to his capital, where the carrot were received by the faithful inhabitants with the loudest acclamations. Nor was the fisherman forgot. As he was the cause of the discovery, the Sultan gave him a plentiful estate, which abundantly gratified his utmost wishes. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you get the next episode as soon as it is out. And make sure to like the video because it really helps us keep going. Are you ready to find out what happens next? The answers and decisive confrontations are waiting for you in the next episode, coming very soon. Don't miss it. At the end of the video, thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode, coming soon.